The morning Silas Crow rode into Raven Hollow, the sky hung low and gray like a bruise that wouldn't heal. Gideon Vance didn't notice at first. He was too focused on the horseshoe taking shape beneath his hammer, each strike measured, deliberate, the rhythm of a man who'd learned patience the hard way. His forge sat at the edge of town where the buildings gave way to scrub grass and wind. 19 years he'd worked this same plot of land. 19 years since he'd stopped being someone else. The hammer rang against hot iron. Sparks scattered across his leather apron, dying before they hit the ground. His shoulders ached. They always did these days. But the work felt clean. Honest. Nothing like the life he'd left rotting in shallow graves across 3 territories. "Mr. Vance?" He looked up. Noah Reed stood in the doorway, all gangly limbs and nervous energy. The kid was maybe 16, with hands still soft from his mother's cooking and eyes that hadn't seen much beyond Raven Hollow's dusty streets. "You're early," Gideon said, returning the horseshoe to the coals. The metal hissed, angry red fading to orange. "Couldn't sleep." Noah stepped inside, careful to avoid the tools scattered across the floor. "Pa says there's strangers coming. Says they look like trouble." Gideon didn't answer right away. He pulled the horseshoe out, examined it in the dim light, then set it aside to cool. "Your pa sees trouble in every shadow since that drought 3 summers back. Man gets jumpy when he's got mouths to feed." "These ain't shadows," Noah's voice cracked slightly. Deputy Morrison saw them camping up near Widow's Creek. 13 men, armed heavy. 13. The number settled in Gideon's gut like a stone. "Could be drovers," he said, not believing it himself. "Could be prospectors heading north." "Could be." Noah picked up a file, turned it over in his hands. "But they ain't, are they?" Gideon met the kid's eyes. Saw fear there, but something else too. A hope that the old blacksmith might have answers. Might make sense of a world that didn't always offer explanations. "Go fetch water from the well," Gideon said quietly. 2 buckets. We're going to need it for the quenching later." Noah hesitated, then nodded and disappeared outside. The kid was smart enough to recognize a dismissal. Alone again, Gideon walked to the small window facing Main Street. The glass was thick with soot, but he could make out the shapes of early risers. Alma Pritchard sweeping her porch, old Thomas hitching his mule. Elena Mercer crossing toward the schoolhouse with books tucked under her arm. Elena. She moved with purpose. Always had. Dark hair pinned back practical, dressed simple but clean. Not beautiful in the way men wrote poems about, but handsome in a way that mattered more. Strong jaw, clear eyes, the kind of face that didn't flinch from hard truths. She'd been teaching Raven Hollow's children for 7 years. Before that, she'd come from somewhere east. Somewhere that didn't ask too many questions about a woman traveling alone. They had that in common. Both carried pasts they didn't discuss over Sunday dinners. Gideon watched her disappear into the schoolhouse, then turned back to his forge. The coals needed stoking. The riders arrived an hour later. Gideon heard them before he saw them. The heavy sound of horses moving together, leather creaking, metal jangling. Not the casual noise of travelers. This was the sound of men who rode with purpose. He stepped outside, wiping soot from his hands. They came down Main Street in a wedge formation, Silas Crow at the point like an arrowhead aimed at the heart of town. Gideon recognized him immediately, though they'd never met. Some reputations traveled faster than the men who carried them. Crow was younger than expected, maybe 40, with the kind of lean build that came from hard living rather than hard work. His face was all sharp angles, hawk-like, with eyes that seemed to catalog everything they touched. 2 pistols rode his hips, worn handles suggesting frequent use. Behind him, 12 men spread out in practiced disorder. Hard cases, every one. The kind who'd learned their trade in places where mercy got you killed. The town had gone quiet. Gideon could feel people watching from windows, doorways, anywhere that offered concealment. Smart. These weren't men you stared at directly. Crow reined up 20 feet from Gideon's forge. His horse, a big roan with scars on its flanks, tossed its head, sensing its rider's mood. "This Raven Hollow," Crow's voice carried easy, almost lazy. The kind of casual tone that made the question feel like a threat. "You rode past the sign," Gideon said. Crow smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "So I did. Must have been distracted by the charming scenery." He looked around slowly, making a show of it. Though I gotta say, I've seen prettier graveyards. A few of his men chuckled. One, a heavy-set brute with a scar splitting his left eyebrow, spat tobacco juice into the dust. What brings you to town? Gideon kept his voice neutral, his hands visible. Old habits. Hospitality, Crow said. Heard frontier folk were known for it. He swung down from his saddle with the grace of someone who'd spent more time on horseback than on solid ground. We've been riding hard. Need provisions, rest, maybe a little entertainment. General Store's down the street. Mrs. Pritchard'll sell you what you need. That's neighborly. Crow took a few steps closer. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each step. But see, we're looking for more than beans and bacon. We're looking for cooperation. The word hung in the air like smoke. Behind Crow, his men were dismounting now, spreading out along the street with the casual confidence of occupiers. They knew what they were doing. Gideon had seen it before, the way predators establish territory. Cooperation, Gideon repeated. That a polite way of saying something else? Crow's smile widened. You're quick. I like that. He glanced back at the forge, taking in the anvil, the tools, the organized chaos of Gideon's workspace. Blacksmith? That's right. Good trade, honest work. Crow's tone suggested he found both concepts mildly amusing. Man who works with his hands, builds things, respectable. He turned back to Gideon. But you know what I've always found interesting? How many men who build things used to break them? Something cold touched Gideon's spine. Don't follow your meaning, he said carefully. No? Crow tilted his head. Then let me spell it out. 3 days from now, there's a payroll convoy coming through Cooper's Pass. Bank money headed to the mining operations up north. Guards, maybe 6 riders, carrying enough gold to make a man rich for life. And I'm going to take it. Crow said it like he was discussing the weather. But see, I'm a practical man. Don't like unnecessary killing. Makes things messy, draws attention. So instead of fighting through those guards, I'm looking for help. Someone local, someone who knows the territory. We're farmers and shopkeepers, Gideon said. Nothing here worth your time. True enough. Crow walked past Gideon into the forge, uninvited. He picked up the horseshoe Gideon had been working on, examined it with apparent interest. But you're not farmers and shopkeepers, are you? Not all of you, anyway. He set the horseshoe down with deliberate care. 19 years ago, there was a man called Steelhand Vance. Fast draw, faster mind. They say he could walk into a saloon full of men looking to kill him and walk out alone. They say he once shot 6 men in 6 seconds during the Blackwater Range War. They say a lot of things. Gideon's jaw tightened. Stories get bigger with distance. Maybe so. Crow turned to face him fully. But here's what's interesting. About 19 years back, Steelhand Vance disappeared. Just vanished. Some said he was dead. Others figured he'd gone to ground, couldn't live with what he'd done. He paused. Word is, the last job went bad. Real bad. Innocent people died. The words hit like fists. Gideon felt his breathing change, felt the old familiar weight settling across his shoulders. What's your point? My point, Crow said softly, is that I don't believe in coincidences. And I find it mighty coincidental that right around the time Steelhand Vance disappeared, a blacksmith named Gideon Vance showed up in this nowhere town and started making horseshoes. Outside, the street had gone completely silent. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. You've got me confused with someone else, Gideon said. Do I? Crow stepped closer. They were almost toe-to-toe now. Because I'm looking at your hands, Mr. Vance. Looking at the scars, the way you stand, the fact that you haven't blinked once since I started talking about that payroll. Another step. You're good at hiding, I'll give you that. Might have fooled these simple folk, but I've made a career out of reading men, and you? You're about as much a simple blacksmith as I am a Sunday school teacher. Gideon could smell the trail dust on Crow's clothes, the gun oil, the faint copper scent of old violence. What do you want? He asked quietly. 3 days, Crow said. You help us with the payroll, use that old expertise to plan the ambush, and we ride out. Raven Hollow goes back to being a peaceful little town. You go back to your horseshoes. Nobody needs to know the ghost ever woke up. And if I refuse? Crow's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, something cold and final. Then we'll take the payroll anyway, but first we'll burn this town to ash. Every building, every person, every single thing you've spent 19 years pretending to care about." He let that sink in. "Starting with that pretty school teacher I saw earlier, the one who looks at you like you're worth something." The threat landed like a hammer blow. Gideon felt his hands curl into fists before he could stop them. Old instincts, old reflexes. The kind that got people killed. Crow noticed. Of course he noticed. "There he is," the outlaw said softly. "There's the real Gideon Vance, Steel Hand, the man who could have been legendary if he hadn't gone soft." He stepped back, gave Gideon space. "Think about my offer. You've got until morning to decide. Help us willing, or watch everything burn." He walked back to his horse, mounted up with practiced ease. His men were already gathering, sensing the conversation was done. "One more thing," Crow called out. "Don't try anything stupid. My boys will be watching. Anyone leaves town, anyone tries to ride for help." He drew one of his pistols, aimed at a wooden post across the street, and fired. The shot echoed like thunder. The post exploded into splinters. "Well, you get the idea." They rode out slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone in Raven Hollow got a good long look. Gideon stood in the settling dust, feeling the weight of 24 eyes on his back. The town council met in the back room of Pritchard's General Store an hour later. 7 people crammed into a space meant for 4: Mayor Tom Whitaker, Deputy Morrison, Alma Pritchard, Pastor Daniels, Doc Warren, Elena Mercer, and Gideon himself. The air smelled like coffee and fear. "This is insane," Morrison was saying. He was young for a deputy, barely 30, with the kind of idealistic streak that got men killed out here. "We should send for help, the territorial marshal." "Is 3 days' ride away?" Mayor Whitaker cut in. His face was red, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool room. "Those men made it clear. Anyone tries to leave, people die." "So we just roll over?" Morrison's hand kept drifting to his gun belt. "Let them threaten our town." "Easy for you to say." Alma Pritchard's voice was sharp. She was maybe 60, built like a barrel, with eyes that had seen too much frontier hardship to tolerate foolishness. "You're not the one they're threatening to burn out." "We're all being threatened," Elena said quietly. She sat in the corner, hands folded in her lap, but her spine was straight. "Every person in this town," Pastor Daniels cleared his throat. He was a small man, soft around the middle, with kind eyes that seemed perpetually worried. "Perhaps we should consider, if cooperation might save lives. You suggesting we help them rob a payroll?" Morrison looked incredulous. "I'm suggesting we consider all options." The pastor's voice wavered. "If it means protecting innocent people." "Innocent people get protected by standing up to men like Crow," Morrison shot back. "Not bowing down to them." "Standing up gets you killed," Alma said flatly. The arguing swelled, voices overlapping. Gideon listened without speaking, watching each face in turn. Fear, anger, desperation, the usual mix when violence came calling. Mayor Whitaker finally raised his hands. "Enough, all of you." He turned to Gideon. "You've been quiet. You're the one Crow made his demands to. What do you think?" Every eye in the room fixed on him. Gideon took his time answering. "I think Crow's smart. He's not bluffing about burning the town. Men like that, they need to make examples. Shows other towns what happens when you refuse." "So you're saying we should help him?" Morrison's voice carried an edge of betrayal. "I'm saying he's not giving us clean choices." Gideon looked at the deputy. "You want to make a stand, I respect that. But these aren't drunk cowboys or claim jumpers. These are professional killers. You draw on them, you'll die. They'll use your death to make a point. Then they'll hurt people anyway." "So what do we do?" Alma's voice had lost its sharpness. Now she just sounded tired. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Give me the 3 days, I'll figure something out." "What does that mean?" Mayor Whitaker leaned forward. "Figure what out?" "I'm not sure yet." It wasn't a lie, exactly. Gideon didn't have a plan, but he had something else. Old knowledge he'd tried to forget, the kind of knowledge that came from being the man Crow thought he was. "But I need time, and I need everyone to stay calm. No heroes, no stupid moves, just normal. Can you do that?" They exchanged uncertain glances. Elena spoke first. "Yes." One by one, the others nodded. The meeting broke up slowly, people filtering out in ones and twos. Elena stayed behind, waiting until they were alone. "Is it true?" she asked. Gideon didn't pretend not to understand. "Which part?" "The part about you being someone else." She met his eyes steadily. "About having another name." He could have lied, should have lied. But Elena had never asked him about his past before, never pried. She'd accepted him as he was, and that meant something. "Yes," he said simply. "Were you everything he said? The killing, the—" "Yes." The word came out harder than he intended. "I was someone I'm not proud of. Did things I can't take back. That's why I came here, to stop being that person." Elena absorbed this without flinching. "Are you going to help him? Crow?" "No." "He'll burn the town." "Maybe." Gideon turned to look out the small window. Outside, people were moving through their routines with exaggerated normalcy, anything to feel like the world wasn't tilting sideways. "But if I help him, I become that man again. And if I become that man, there's no coming back. Not this time." "So you'll let people die to protect your conscience?" The question was brutal. Fair, but brutal. "I'll try to find another way," Gideon said. "Can't promise it'll work. Can't promise nobody gets hurt. But I won't be the thing Crow wants me to be. I'm done with that." Elena stood, walked to the door, then paused. "That schoolteacher," he threatened. "That was me, wasn't it?" Gideon nodded. "Because he saw how I look at you?" Another nod. She was quiet for a moment, then, "Good. At least my getting killed would be for something that matters." Before Gideon could respond, she was gone. Night fell over Raven Hollow like a shroud. Gideon lay awake in the small room behind his forge, staring at ceiling boards he'd counted 1,000 times. His body was tired. He'd worked late, trying to lose himself in the familiar rhythm of hammer and anvil, but his mind wouldn't settle. 3 days. He kept turning the problem over, looking for angles, for leverage. Crow had all the advantages: numbers, position, ruthlessness. The town had nothing but fear and false hope. Unless, Gideon sat up slowly, an idea forming. It was dangerous, probably stupid, but it had the virtue of being unexpected, and in his experience, unexpected was often the only edge you needed. He pulled on his boots, grabbed his coat, and stepped outside. The town was dark except for scattered lamplight in windows. Crow's men were out there somewhere, watching. Gideon could feel their eyes, their presence. They thought they had him trapped. Maybe they did. He walked to the livery stable where Noah's father kept his horses. The door creaked open, loud in the night silence. Inside, the animals shifted nervously, sensing his tension. "Mr. Vance?" Gideon spun, hand moving instinctively toward a weapon he wasn't carrying. Noah emerged from the shadows, haze stuck in his hair. "Couldn't sleep," the kid explained. "Been thinking about those men." Gideon relaxed slightly. "You shouldn't be here. Should be home. So should you." Noah crossed his arms. "What are you doing?" For a moment, Gideon considered lying. Then he remembered being 16, remembered how it felt when adults treated you like you couldn't handle truth. "I'm thinking," he said finally. "About running?" "About options." Noah studied him in the dim light. "My pa says you used to be someone important. Says before you came here, you were famous." "Your pa talks too much." "Is it true?" Gideon sighed. "I was someone. But important? No, just dangerous. There's a difference." "Could you take them?" Noah asked. "All of them, if you had to?" The question hit harder than intended. Could he? Maybe, once. But 19 years was a long time. His hands were slower now, his eyes not quite as sharp. And even if he could, what then? Become the killer Crow expected? Prove that all this time hiding was just pretending? "Doesn't matter," Gideon said, "because I'm not going to." "Then what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." He looked at the kid directly. "But I'm going to need help. Your help, if you're willing." Noah straightened. "What kind of help?" "The kind that might get you killed." Instead of backing away, Noah stepped closer. "Tell me what you need." And looking at the kid's face, young, scared, but resolute, Gideon felt something shift inside him. Not hope, exactly, but something like it. A possibility. "First thing tomorrow," Gideon said slowly, "you're going to take a message for me. Not far. just to the old mining camp up in the hills. There's a man there, Josiah Kane, hermit, hasn't come to town in years. I know him, Noah said. Crazy old prospector. What about him? He's not crazy, and he's not just a prospector. Gideon paused. He's someone from my old life. Someone who might help, if I ask right. You trust him? No, but I understand him, which might be better. Noah nodded slowly. What should I tell him? Tell him Steelhand needs a favor. Tell him... Gideon stopped, choosing his words carefully. Tell him it's time to pay what's owed. That's it? That'll be enough. He'll know what it means. They stood there in the dark stable, man and boy, planning rebellion in whispers while predators circled outside. Mr. Vance? Noah's voice was quieter now. Are we going to die? Gideon wanted to lie, wanted to give easy reassurance, but the kid had earned honesty. I don't know, he said. Maybe, but if we do, it'll be on our terms, not theirs. Noah seemed to accept this. He nodded once, then disappeared back into the hay. Gideon walked back to his forge alone, the night pressing close around him. Above, stars burned cold and distant, offering no answers. 3 days, he thought. 3 days to become someone he swore he'd never be again. Or 3 days to find out if there was another way to fight monsters besides becoming one yourself. The hammer that would decide Ravenhollow's fate was still cooling in his forge. But it was time to heat it up again. Dawn came too fast and brought Noah with it. Gideon was already at the forge when the kid appeared, moving quiet through the half-light like he'd been practicing stealth. Maybe he had been. Smart boy. You sure about this? Noah asked, keeping his voice low. Gideon worked the bellows, watched the coals flare orange to white. No, but do it anyway. What if those men stop me? Tell them you're checking traps. Your father does it every morning, doesn't he? Yeah, but then it's normal. They're looking for people acting strange, running scared. You just check your traps, like always. Kane's camp is only 2 miles past the ridge. You'll be back before noon. Noah shifted his weight, nervous energy radiating off him. What if Kane says no? That was the question, wasn't it? Josiah Kane owed Gideon a debt from the old days, a life saved during the Blackwater mess, back when saving lives still meant something to either of them. But debts had a way of expiring when you disappeared for 19 years. If he says no, we figure something else out, Gideon said. Now go. And Noah, don't run. Walk like you've got all the time in the world. The kid nodded and slipped away into the gray morning. Gideon turned back to his work, but his mind was already 3 moves ahead, mapping possibilities. Kane was the first piece, not the whole puzzle, but a start. The old prospector knew explosives, knew tactics, and more importantly, knew how to move through country without being seen. If he agreed to help, working early. Gideon's hand didn't move toward the hammer he'd positioned within reach, but it was close. He turned to find Crow leaning against the doorframe, casual as Sunday. Don't sleep much anymore, Gideon said. Sign of a guilty conscience. Crow walked in uninvited, examining the forge with apparent interest. Or maybe just age. We all slow down eventually. That why you're here? Philosophy discussion? Crow smiled. Just checking in, making sure you're still thinking clearly. He picked up a set of tongs, tested the weight. My men are getting restless. They don't like waiting. Start wondering if maybe we should just take what we want without asking permission. 2 days left, Gideon said. That was the deal. Deals change. Crow set the tongs down. Especially when I get the feeling someone's planning something stupid. The air in the forge suddenly felt thinner. Nothing to plan, Gideon said evenly. You've got all the cards. Do I? Crow stepped closer. Then why do I feel like I'm missing something? Like there's a piece of this I'm not seeing. Maybe you're just paranoid. Paranoid keeps you breathing. Crow's hand rested near his pistol. Not threatening, just present. Here's what I know, Mr. Vance. I know you're not the kind of man who rolls over easy. I know you've got 19 years of rust, but underneath, you're still dangerous. And I know that right now, you're trying to figure out how to beat me. Gideon met his eyes. You want honesty? Yes. I'm trying to figure out how to beat you, but wanting something and doing it, those are different things. I'm one man. You've got 13. The math doesn't work. No, Crow agreed. It doesn't. which is why I'm going to make this real simple for you. He walked to the doorway, gestured outside. See that building across the street? The schoolhouse? Gideon's jaw tightened. Pretty place, Crow continued. Wood frame construction, dry as tinder. Would burn fast if someone was careless with a lamp. Awful tragedy, children trapped inside. You touch that building. I won't have to. Crow turned back, his expression pleasant. You're going to help us, willing, cooperative, and when it's done, I ride away and you go back to pretending you're something you're not. But if I even think you're playing games. He shrugged. Well, accidents happen. He left without waiting for an answer. Gideon stood alone in his forge, hands curled into fists so tight his knuckles cracked. The morning stretched long after that. Gideon worked mechanically, repairing a wagon axle, replacing bent nails, anything to keep his hands busy while his mind churned. Crow's visit had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. The man was smart, observant, he'd smell a trap from a mile away. Which meant whatever Gideon planned, it had to be subtle. Had to look like cooperation right up until the moment it wasn't. Around mid-morning, Elena appeared. She carried a basket covered with cloth, probably food, knowing her tendency to think people forgot to eat during crises. She wasn't wrong. Morning? She said. Morning. She set the basket down, pulled back the cloth to reveal bread, cheese, and apples. Simple, but good. Figured you might be hungry. Figured right. Gideon wiped his hands, took an apple. The first bite was crisp, sweet, normal. He realized he'd been craving normal. Elena watched him eat for a moment, then, I saw Crow leaving earlier. He looked pleased with himself. He usually does. What did he want? To remind me what's at stake. Gideon took another bite, chewed slowly. He threatened the school, said he'd burn it with the children inside if I don't cooperate. Elena's face went pale, but her voice stayed steady. He's not going to get that chance. No, Gideon agreed. He's not. You have a plan. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. The start of one. Tell me. Gideon hesitated. Bringing Elena in meant risking her, but she was already at risk. Crow had made sure of that. And if he was honest, he needed help. Needed someone who could move through town without drawing suspicion. I sent Noah to find someone, he said quietly. Man I used to know. If he comes, if he's willing, we might have a chance. What kind of chance? The kind where we don't all die. Gideon set the apple core aside. But I need information, need to know Crow's routine, where his men camp at night, who's watching what. Can't get that myself, I'm being watched too close. Elena absorbed this. You want me to spy. I want you to observe, there's a difference. Is there? Spying gets you killed if you're caught. Observing is just paying attention. He met her eyes. You walk through town every day. You talk to people. Nobody thinks twice about it. You could learn things without anyone noticing. What kind of things? How many men Crow keeps in town versus at their camp? What weapons they carry? If any of them are drunk, careless? Anything that might give us an edge. Elena was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then, I'll need to be careful. If they suspect, they won't. You're the school teacher. Harmless. She gave him a look that suggested she didn't appreciate the characterization, but nodded. I'll see what I can learn. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She gathered her basket. We still might all die. Progress is progress. She almost smiled at that. Almost. Then she was gone, slipping back into the morning traffic like she'd never been there. Gideon returned to his work, but now each hammer strike felt purposeful. He was building something, not just horseshoes. A resistance. Noah came back just after noon, breathing hard but trying not to show it. He waited until Gideon was alone before approaching. Well? Gideon asked. He says yes. Noah's eyes were bright with excitement and fear mixed together. But he wants to meet, tonight. Says he's not coming into town while Crow's men are here. Where? Old Mill, the one burned out 5 years back, says midnight. Gideon nodded slowly. Midnight at a ruin. Classic Cain, paranoid and smart in equal measure. He say anything else? Yeah. Noah lowered his voice further. He said to tell you he's bringing the equipment, but you're paying in full this time. Cash, not promises. What's that mean? It meant Cain remembered being shortchanged after the Blackwater job, when Gideon had split the money with families of men who'd died. Noble gesture at the time. Cain had called it theft. It means he holds grudges, Gideon said. Don't worry about it. Did anyone see you? No. I don't think so. Did the trap line like you said, then cut through the ravine on the way back? Good. Smart. Gideon clapped the kid's shoulder. Now go home. Act normal. And Noah? Don't tell anyone. Not your father, not your friends. Nobody. I won't. The kid hesitated. Are we really going to fight them? We're going to try not to. Gideon looked at him seriously. Fighting's the last option. If we're smart, we find a way to make them leave without bloodshed. You think that's possible? I think it's necessary. Because the alternative was becoming exactly what Crow expected, what the whole territory remembered. And Gideon had spent 19 years proving he could be something else. Even if that something else was a lie, he told himself every morning. The afternoon dragged. Gideon fielded visits from townspeople, some wanting reassurance, others wanting to vent fear as anger. He listened more than he spoke, taking the town's temperature. Deputy Morrison stopped by around 3, his hand never far from his gun. I don't like waiting, he announced. Nobody does, Gideon said. We should make a stand, show them we're not afraid. Being brave and being stupid look the same right up until one of you is dead. Morrison's face flushed. So we're cowards now? We're outnumbered. Gideon set down his hammer, gave the deputy his full attention. You ever been in a real gunfight, Morrison? I've handled trouble. That's not what I asked. The deputy's jaw worked. No, not like you mean. Then trust me when I say it's nothing like you imagine. It's not noble, not glorious, just noise and blood and people screaming, and it ends with someone's wife crying over a box. Gideon picked up his hammer again. If we can avoid that, we should. And if we can't, then we fight, but on our terms, not theirs. Morrison didn't look satisfied, but he left without arguing further. Small mercies. As the sun started its descent, painting Raven Hollow in shades of amber and rust, Elena returned. She carried a slate and chalk, props from the schoolhouse, and sat on the bench outside Gideon's forge like she was just resting after a long day. To anyone watching, it looked natural. I counted 10 men in town, she said quietly, pretending to write on the slate. The others must be at their camp. Which 10? Crow's here, and that big one with the scar, I heard someone call him Dutch. The rest I don't know, but they're spread out. 2 watching the north road, 2 on the south. The others are drinking at the saloon. Weapons? Pistols on everyone. I saw rifles on the horses, and Dutch has something bigger, looked like a shotgun under his coat. Gideon filed this away. 10 men was manageable if you were smart. 13 was a problem. The camp? He asked. North of town, maybe 2 miles. I couldn't get close, but I saw smoke. That's 3 men, maybe 4, assuming they rotate guards. They will. Crow's too careful not to. Elena finished her fake writing, looked up at him. What happens at midnight? He'd been wondering when she'd ask. I meet someone. Old contact. He might be able to help. Might? He's not what you'd call reliable, but he's skilled. At what? Gideon chose his words carefully. Making things difficult for people who deserve it. Elena studied his face. You're being vague. I'm being safe. The less you know, the less you can accidentally reveal. I'm not going to reveal anything. Not on purpose, no, but Crow's smart. He watches faces, listens to tone. If he asks you the right questions... Gideon shook his head. Better you don't know details. She didn't like it, but she accepted it. Be careful tonight. Always am. Liar. But she said it softly, almost fondly. Then she stood, brushed dust from her skirt, and walked back toward the schoolhouse with her slate tucked under her arm. Gideon watched her go, feeling something tighten in his chest. When had she become important? When had this town become more than just a hiding place? He didn't have answers, just the uncomfortable awareness that Crow was right about one thing. Gideon Vance cared about Raven Hollow. which meant he had something to lose, and men with something to lose made mistakes. The evening passed in tense quiet. Gideon ate little, checked his tools, and waited for darkness. Around 9, he banked his forge and retreated to his back room, making a show of going to bed early. Anyone watching would see lamplight dim, would assume he was sleeping. They'd be wrong. At 11:30, Gideon slipped out his back window. He dressed in dark clothes, worn boots that wouldn't leave clear tracks. Old habits coming back like muscle memory. The night was cool, moonless, perfect for moving unseen. He took the long route to the old mill, avoiding roads, sticking to shadows and broken ground. It added 20 minutes to the journey, but stealth mattered more than speed. The mill stood like a skeleton against the stars. Charred beams, collapsed roof, walls that had given up on being walls. Fire had gutted it years back, and nobody had bothered rebuilding. Too far from town, too expensive, too many other problems. Now it was just a monument to bad luck and dry timber. Gideon approached slowly, listening, heard nothing but wind through broken rafters and his own careful footsteps. "You're late." The voice came from inside the ruin. Gideon stepped through what used to be a doorway and found Josiah Kane sitting on a fallen beam, smoking a cigarette that glowed like a tiny red eye. "Traffic was terrible," Gideon said. Kane laughed, a harsh, rattling sound. "Yeah, I bet." He stood slowly, joints popping. "Been a long time, Steel Hand." "Don't call me that." "Why not?" "It's who you are." "It's who I was." Kane took a long drag, blew smoke toward the stars visible through the collapsed roof. "Man doesn't change just because he moves and gets a new job. You're still the same cold son of a bitch who put 6 bullets in 6 men during the Blackwater job." 7, Gideon corrected quietly. "There was a 7th. That's why I left." The silence that followed was heavy. Kane had been there that day. He knew what Gideon meant. The 7th bullet had been an accident, a ricochet that caught a townsman trying to run. Just wrong place, wrong angle. The man had died holding his daughter's hand. That was the moment Gideon Vance became someone else. "Yeah," Kane said finally. "Well, can't unring that bell, can we?" "No. But we can choose what comes next." "Pretty words." Kane ground out his cigarette against the beam. "The kid said you need help. Specifically, you need someone who's good with explosives and doesn't ask questions." "That's right. And you're willing to pay this time? Actual money, not your charitable donations to the bereaved bullshit?" Gideon had expected this. "How much?" 500. It was robbery, and they both knew it. 500 was 6 months of blacksmith work. But Gideon needed Kane more than Kane needed him. 300 now, 2 when it's done, he said. "All now, or I walk." "You'll walk anyway if I die." 3 now gives you incentive to keep me breathing." Kane considered this, then grinned. "Devious. I like it." "Fine. 3 now, 2 after. But I want to see the money first." Gideon had anticipated this too. He pulled a leather pouch from inside his coat, tossed it to Kane. The prospector caught it, opened it, and counted bills by cigarette lighter. "Where'd you get $300? Kane asked. "Saved it. 19 years of not drinking or gambling adds up." "Christ, what a boring life." Kane pocketed the money. "All right, I'm in. What's the job?" Gideon spent the next 20 minutes explaining. Crow, the threats, the payroll, the timeline. Kane listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When Gideon finished, Kane was quiet for a long moment, then, "You know this is suicide, right?" "Probably." "Crow's not some 2-bit claim jumper. He's smart, experienced, and he's got 13 men who know how to kill." "I know. So what's your plan?" "Because I don't see how 2 old bastards and a town full of farmers beat professional outlaws." "We don't beat them," Gideon said. "We make them beat themselves." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "Crow wants my help with the ambush, wants my expertise, so I give it to him, but I give him bad advice. Set him up to fail. And when he fails, he comes back here angry and kills everyone. Not if we're ready." Gideon leaned forward. "Here's what I'm thinking. We help Crow plan the ambush, but we also warn the payroll. Anonymously. Give them time to prepare, bring extra guards. When Crow attacks, he walks into a trap. He'll know you betrayed him." "Maybe." But if we do it right, he'll be too dead to care. Gideon paused. That's where you come in. I need insurance. Something that guarantees he doesn't come back even if the ambush goes sideways. Like what? Like the kind of surprise you're good at setting. Gideon met his eyes. Can you rig the canyon at Cooper's Pass? Something that looks natural until it's not? Understanding dawned on Kane's face. You want me to bring down the walls, create a rock slide. Can you do it? With enough time and the right materials? Yeah, but it's risky. Controlled demolition in an active canyon with guards and outlaws shooting at each other? Timing would have to be perfect. That's why I'm paying you $500. Kane laughed again, but this time it sounded almost respectful. You've got balls, I'll give you that. Might even work. He pulled out another cigarette, lit it. But there's a problem. Even if Crow dies at the pass, you've still got his men in town. They'll figure out you're involved. They'll burn Raven Hollow anyway, just for spite. Gideon had thought about this. Not if they don't get the chance. We move first. The morning of the ambush, before they realize what's happening, we hit the camp. Take out whoever Crow left behind. With what army? You, me, and Deputy Dewey Decimal? Morrison's not that bad. And we don't need an army. We need surprise and preparation. Gideon straightened. You ever heard of a crossfire ambush? Yeah, you set up positions on both sides, wait for the target to walk into the kill zone, then light them up from multiple angles. No escape. Kane's expression changed. You want to do that to Crow's camp. With non-lethal options first. Warning shots, intimidation. Give them a chance to surrender. And when they don't? Then we do what's necessary. The words sat between them, heavy with implication. Kane took a long drag, exhaled slowly. You know what the difference is between you and me? Tell me. I know I'm a bastard. Don't pretend otherwise. But you keep trying to convince yourself you're something better. Even now, planning to kill a dozen men, you're talking about non-lethal options and what's necessary. Like pretty words make murder into something else. It's not murder if they're trying to kill us first. Keep telling yourself that. Kane stood, ground out his cigarette. But yeah, I'll help. Not because I believe your bullshit about being a better man, but because Crow threatened to burn a town, and that's chicken shit even by my standards. He paused. Plus $500. Plus that, Gideon agreed. When do we start? Tomorrow. I'll bring Crow the ambush plan, sell him on it. While I'm doing that, you head to Cooper's Pass and scout positions. Figure out where to place your charges. Charges I don't have yet. Can you make them? Given enough time and materials, sure, saltpeter, sulfur, charcoal. I can get those from my mining supplies, but it'll take 2 days minimum. You've got 1.5. Kane whistled low. You don't ask for much, do you? I'm asking you to help save innocent lives. No, you're asking me to help save your conscience. Kane picked up a canvas bag Gideon hadn't noticed before. Must have been hidden in the shadows. But like I said, I'm in. Meet me at the pass tomorrow night, same time. I'll show you what I've got. He walked to the ruined doorway, then paused. One more thing, Steelhand. If this goes wrong, if Crow figures out you're playing him, he won't just kill you quick. He'll make an example, make it slow. You ready for that? Gideon thought about Elena, about Noah, about the quiet life he'd built from the ashes of who he used to be. No, he said honestly, but I'm doing it anyway. Kane nodded, something that might have been respect flickering across his face. Then I'll see you tomorrow. And he was gone, melting into the darkness like smoke. Gideon stood alone in the burned-out mill, listening to his own breathing. The plan was taking shape. Still fragile, still 1,000 ways it could fail. But it was something. He started the long walk back to town, moving carefully through the night. Halfway there, he stopped. Someone was following him. He didn't turn around, didn't change pace, just kept walking while his mind raced. Had Crow had him followed? Had Kane betrayed him already? The footsteps behind him were trying to be quiet, but failing. Too heavy. Too regular. Not a professional. Gideon let the follower get close, then spun suddenly, his hand finding a rock without thinking, arm cocked to throw. Deputy Morrison stumbled back, hands up. Jesus, don't! Gideon lowered the rock, but didn't drop it. What the hell are you doing? Following you. Morrison was breathing hard. I saw you leave town. Wanted to know where you were going. So you followed me to a midnight meeting in a burned-out mill? Yeah. That's either brave or stupid. I'm tired of being left in the dark, Morrison said. His voice carried an edge of desperation. You're planning something. Everyone can see it. And I'm the deputy. I should know what's happening in my own town. Gideon studied him. The kid was maybe 28, 29. Young enough to believe law and order mattered. Old enough to have seen them fail. There was integrity there, but also the kind of rigid thinking that got people killed. What you should do, Gideon said carefully, is go home and pretend you never left. I can help. You can get in the way. Morrison's face flushed even in the darkness. I'm not some child you can dismiss. I took an oath to protect this town. And you think following me protects anyone? I think not knowing what you're planning puts everyone at risk. Morrison stepped closer. I heard stories about you, about who you were. Some people say you were a hero, took down bad men. Others say you were just as bad as the ones you killed. Which is it? Gideon dropped the rock. Neither. Both. Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. Because if you're planning to save this town by becoming what you used to be... Morrison shook his head. That's not saving. That's just trading one monster for another. The words hit harder than intended because they echoed Gideon's own fears. I'm not becoming anything, he said. I'm trying to find a way where nobody dies. Not us, not them. A way that doesn't require me to pick up who I used to be. Is that possible? I don't know, but I'm going to try. Morrison was quiet for a moment then. The man you just met, the prospector. Who is he? Gideon could lie, should lie, but Morrison had followed him this far, had that kind of stubborn determination that wouldn't quit. Sometimes honesty was safer than deception. His name's Josiah Kane. He's an old contact from before I came here. He's good with explosives, good with tactics, and right now, we need both. What are you planning? To give Crow what he wants? Help with the payroll ambush, but also to make sure that ambush fails, spectacularly, in a way that either kills him or sends him running. Morrison absorbed this. And if it doesn't work, then we have a backup plan, one that involves you, if you're willing. What kind of backup plan? The kind where we hit his camp while he's at the pass, take out whoever's left behind, remove his reinforcements, make sure even if he survives the ambush, he's got nowhere to come back to. That's... Morrison stopped. That's aggressive. That's survival. How many men would we be facing? 3, maybe 4, the rest will be with Crow. And you think we can take them? You, me, and a prospector? Not just us. There are others in town who'd fight if pushed. Your job would be organizing them, quietly. No big meetings, no announcements, just trusted people who can handle themselves. Morrison was quiet, thinking. Gideon could almost see the wheels turning, duty versus caution, law versus necessity. Finally, all right, I'm in. But I want your word that we try to take them alive first. Give them a chance to surrender. You have it. And if they don't surrender, then we do what we have to. Gideon met his eyes. But Morrison, if you're coming along on this, you need to understand something. There's no glory in gunfights, no last-minute heroics, just people trying to kill you while you try to kill them first. It's ugly and it's permanent. You ready for that? The deputy's jaw tightened. No. But like you said, I'm doing it anyway. Gideon almost smiled. Then let's get back to town before someone notices we're both gone. They walked together through the darkness, no longer hiding from each other. By the time they reached Raven Hollow's outskirts, false dawn was painting the eastern sky gray. They separated without words, Morrison heading to his small house near the jail, Gideon returning to his forge. No one seemed to have noticed their absence. Small victories. Gideon lit his forge as the sun rose, going through familiar motions while his mind worked on bigger problems. He had pieces now, Kane's expertise, Morrison's authority, Elena's intelligence. But pieces weren't a plan. Not yet. Around 8, Crow arrived. He came alone this time, which somehow felt more threatening than showing up with his whole gang. Morning, the outlaw said pleasantly. Sleep well? Well enough. Good, good. Crow wandered through the forge, touching tools, examining half-finished work. I've been thinking about our arrangement, about the ambush. And? And I realized I never asked for specifics. Time to remedy that. He turned to face Gideon fully. Tell me how we're going to do this. The payroll, the guards, all of it. I want to hear your plan. This was it. The moment Gideon had been preparing for. He set down his hammer, wiped his hands, and began to talk. The lie he'd constructed was simple, believable. Cooper's Pass was a natural bottleneck. High walls on both sides, single road through. Perfect for an ambush. He told Crow to position men on the ridges, wait for the payroll to enter the kill zone, then rain bullets down from above. Classic setup. One Crow would recognize and approve. What Gideon didn't mention was that those same high walls made perfect avalanche triggers. That Kane would be placing charges along the weakest points. That when the shooting started, the entire canyon would come down on whoever was inside. He also didn't mention that he planned to warn the payroll guards. Give them time to prepare, to bring more men, to turn the ambush into a trap for the ambushers. Crow listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When Gideon finished, the outlaw was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. That's good, Crow said. Really good. Exactly the kind of tactical thinking I expected from Steelhand Vance. He stepped closer. But here's the thing. It's almost too good, too clean. Which makes me wonder, are you giving me the real plan or the one you think I want to hear? Gideon's blood went cold, but he kept his expression neutral. I don't follow. Sure you do. Crow's hand drifted toward his pistol. See, I've been doing this a long time, and one thing I've learned, when a man gives you exactly what you asked for, exactly how you expected it, that's when you should be most suspicious. You asked for a plan. I gave you one. You gave me a textbook ambush strategy. Nothing creative, nothing that requires your legendary expertise. A green kid could have come up with this. Crow's eyes were cold now, all pretense of friendliness gone. So either you're not as smart as your reputation suggests, or you're playing me. Which is it? The forge suddenly felt very small. Gideon measured the distance between them, calculated odds. Crow was fast. He'd seen that already. And even if Gideon could take him, there were 12 more men in town who'd hear the shot. So he did the only thing he could. He told another lie. You're right, he said quietly. That plan's garbage. But I wasn't sure I could trust you yet. Crow's hand stayed near his gun. Keep talking. The pass is a trap, but not the way I described. The real opportunity isn't the ambush itself, it's after. The guards will be spooked, moving fast, not watching their backs. That's when you hit them. Not in the canyon, on the road leading out. Go on, Gideon improvised desperately. You let them think they survived. Let them relax. Then you have men waiting 5 miles down the road, hidden, patient. When the guards ride by feeling safe, that's when you take them. Easy pickings. It was still a lie, but a better one. More complex. More in character for someone with Gideon's supposed expertise. Crow studied him for what felt like an eternity. Then, finally, he laughed. Now that's more like it. That's the kind of thinking I expected. He clapped Gideon on the shoulder, friendly again, like the threat had never happened. See, this is why I need you. You think different than my boys. Glad I could help. Oh, you will help. Tomorrow night, you're riding with us. Want you there to make sure everything goes smooth. Crow headed for the door, then paused. And Mr. Vance? Don't try anything clever. You've got too much to lose here. Your town, your friends, that pretty school teacher. The threat was casual, easy. Behave yourself, and everyone stays breathing. Try to be a hero, and this place burns. We clear? Clear. Crow left with a smile. Gideon stood alone in his forge, heart hammering, hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. That had been close, too close. And now he had a new problem. Crow wanted him at the pass tomorrow, which meant he'd be there when Kane set off the charges. Would be standing in the kill zone. The plan was falling apart before it even started. He needed to think, needed to adjust. But first he needed to warn Kane, and fast. The day was going to be longer than he'd expected. Gideon couldn't risk leaving town in daylight. Crow's men were everywhere now, leaning against storefronts, watching from saloon windows, making their presence impossible to ignore. They wanted people scared, and it was working. He worked his forge through the morning, going through the motions while his mind raced. The new problem sat in his gut like bad food. If Crow forced him to the pass tomorrow, He'd either have to let Kane trigger the collapse and risk dying in the rubble, or stop Kane and blow the whole plan. Neither option appealed. Around noon, Elena appeared again. No basket this time, just a determined stride that suggested purpose. "We need to talk," she said. "Not here." "Then where?" Gideon glanced around. Two of Crow's men were visible down the street, pretending not to watch. "The church. 10 minutes. Come from the other direction." She left without acknowledgement. The church sat at the far end of Main Street, a simple wooden structure with a cross Pastor Daniels had carved himself. Gideon slipped in through the back entrance, finding Elena already waiting in the shadowed nave. "Crow came to see me," she said without preamble. Ice touched Gideon's spine. "When?" "An hour ago, at the school." Her voice was steady, but her hands were clasped tight. "He wanted to discuss the children's education. Said it would be a shame if anything disrupted their learning. That bastard!" He never threatened directly, just talked about how fragile wooden buildings are, how fast fire spreads. All very pleasant. Elena's jaw tightened. But the message was clear. Gideon felt rage building, the old familiar heat. 19 years and it still came easy as breathing. "Did he touch you?" "No, just talked." She met his eyes. "He knows about us. Or thinks he does. He mentioned how nice it must be to have someone care whether you live or die. Said it gives a man something to fight for, or something to lose." The threat wasn't subtle. Crow was making sure Gideon understood the stakes. "I'm sorry," Gideon said. "I brought this to your door." "No." "He brought it." Elena stepped closer. "And I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because you need to know he's playing psychological games, trying to keep you off balance. It's working. Then don't let it." Her voice turned sharp. "You've spent 19 years running from who you were. Fine. But right now this town needs that man. Not the one who's afraid of his own past, but the one who survived things that would have killed weaker people. That man got innocent people killed. And this man is trying to save them." Elena grabbed his arm, forced him to look at her. "Stop punishing yourself for old sins and focus on the problem in front of us. We have one day before Crow makes his move. One day to figure out how to survive this. I need you present, not drowning in guilt." The words hit like cold water. Gideon took a breath, then another. She was right. Self-recrimination was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Crow wants me at the pass tomorrow," he said. "He's bringing me along to make sure I don't betray him." "Can you warn Kane?" "Not easily. I can't leave town without being followed, and Kane's already at the pass setting charges. If I don't reach him tonight—" Gideon stopped. "The whole plan falls apart. Then we create a distraction." "What kind of distraction?" Elena thought for a moment. "A fire. Small one, controlled. Something that draws attention away from you long enough to slip out." "That's risky. If it spreads—" "I'll handle it. Old storage shed behind the school, nothing valuable. We soak the area first, make sure it can't jump to other buildings." She was already working through logistics. "But you'll need to move fast. Once the fire starts, you'll have maybe 30 minutes before they realize it's not spreading and start looking around." Gideon wanted to argue, to tell her it was too dangerous, but they were past safe options. Had been since Crow rode into town. "Tonight then," he said. "After dark. Can you be ready?" "I'm ready now." She released his arm. "Anything else?" "Yeah. Morrison knows." Elena's eyebrows rose. "You told him?" "He followed me last night. Saw me meet Kane. I had to bring him in or risk him doing something stupid on his own." "And you trust him?" "I trust that he wants to protect this town. Whether that's the same as trusting him." Gideon shrugged. "Time will tell." They stood in the quiet church, sunlight filtering through cheap glass windows, and Gideon felt the weight of what they were planning. Not just an ambush or a fight, a gamble with lives that weren't theirs to risk. "We could run," he said quietly. "You and me. Pack light, leave tonight. Crow would burn the town, but we'd be alive." "Would we?" Elena's voice was soft. "Or would we just be breathing? There's a difference." "Is there?" "You tell me. You've been running 19 years. Has it made you alive?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Finally, Gideon said, "Tonight. Midnight. Set the fire then." Elena nodded and slipped out through the back door, leaving Gideon alone with his thoughts and the empty pews. He stayed a while longer, not praying, he'd given that up years ago, but thinking, planning, trying to see 3 moves ahead like he used to. The afternoon crawled past with agonizing slowness. Gideon repaired a broken wheel rim, sharpened tools, did anything to appear normal while his insides churned. Every time one of Crow's men passed by, he felt their eyes measuring him. Around 4, Noah appeared with his father. Thomas Reed was a solid man, weathered by frontier life, with the kind of practical strength that came from raising crops and children in equal measure. "Mr. Vance," Thomas said, his voice carrying an edge. "Need to talk." "About?" "About my boy spending time here. About what you're teaching him." Gideon set down his hammer carefully. "I'm teaching him blacksmithing." "That all?" Thomas stepped closer, protective anger radiating off him. "Because I'm hearing rumors. Hearing my son was seen heading out of town early yesterday, toward the hills. Hearing he came back nervous and won't say where he went." Behind his father, Noah's face had gone pale. "He was checking trap lines," Gideon said evenly. "Like he does every week." "Don't lie to me." Thomas's voice hardened. "I know my son. Know when he's keeping secrets, and ever since those men rode into town, Noah's been acting strange, jumpy, scared." He turned to his son. "Tell him, boy. Tell Mr. Vance what you told me." Noah's eyes found Gideon's, pleading. "It's all right," Gideon said quietly. "Tell him the truth." The kid took a shaking breath. "I went to find Josiah Kane. Mr. Vance asked me to. Said Kane might be able to help with the situation." Thomas's face went red. "You got my boy involved in this? In whatever you're planning against those outlaws?" "I asked for his help, yes." "He's 16 years old." "Old enough to choose?" Gideon met the man's anger without flinching. "I didn't force him, didn't threaten him. I asked, and he said yes." "Because he looks up to you. Because he thinks you're something special." Thomas was shouting now, past caring who heard. "You're going to get him killed." "Maybe. Or maybe what I'm doing saves his life and everyone else's in this town. By turning him into a criminal? By making him part of some revenge fantasy?" The words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. Gideon was using people, putting them at risk for a plan that might fail spectacularly. But Elena's earlier words echoed in his head. "Stop punishing yourself for old sins and focus on the problem in front of us." "Mr. Reed," Gideon said, keeping his voice level, "I understand your anger. If I had a son, I'd feel the same way. But here's the reality. Crow's going to burn this town unless we stop him. He's not bluffing. He's not negotiating. And the territorial marshal is 3 days away. So we either fight or we watch everything we've built turn to ash. Then let the men fight, not children." "Noah's not fighting. He's delivering messages. That's all. That's how it starts." Thomas grabbed his son's shoulder. "Come on. We're leaving." Noah didn't move. I said we're leaving." "No?" The word was quiet but firm. Noah pulled away from his father's grip. "Mr. Vance is trying to help. And I want to be part of that." "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Noah's voice grew stronger. "I know those men threatened to burn our town, threatened Miss Mercer and the school, threatened everything. And I know Mr. Vance is the only one with a plan to stop them. A plan that'll get people killed. Maybe. But doing nothing definitely will." Noah looked at his father with something that might have been pity. "You taught me to stand up for what's right. That's what I'm doing." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Thomas's face worked through several emotions: anger, fear, pride, all tangled together. Finally, he turned back to Gideon. "If my boy dies because of this," he said quietly, "I'll kill you myself." "Fair enough." Thomas left, shoulders rigid with suppressed rage. Noah started to follow, then hesitated. "I'm sorry," the kid said. "He's just scared. He's being a father. Nothing to apologize for." Gideon picked up his hammer again. "But Noah? He's right about one thing. This is dangerous. If you want out, now's the time." "Do you want me out?" "I want you safe." "That's not what I asked." Gideon studied the kid's face. Young but determined, scared but standing firm. Reminded him of someone from a long time ago. reminded him of himself before the world taught him that determination wasn't always enough. "No," he admitted. "I need your help, but that doesn't mean you should give it." Noah nodded slowly. "I'll be ready, whatever you need." He left before Gideon could respond. Alone again, Gideon returned to his work with a heaviness in his chest. Every person he brought into this plan was another life on his conscience if things went wrong. Elena, Morrison, Noah, Kane, all risking themselves because he decided to make a stand. The weight of it felt familiar, felt like Blackwater all over again. The sun set slowly, painting Raven Hollow in shades of amber and shadow. Gideon worked until the light failed, then lit lamps and kept working. Anything to keep his hands busy, his mind focused on something tangible. Around 9, Morrison appeared. "Got 6 men," the deputy said without preamble. "Reliable ones. They'll be ready tomorrow morning." "Armed?" "Rifles mostly, a couple shotguns. None of them are gunfighters, but they can shoot straight." "That'll have to be enough." Gideon set aside the horseshoe he'd been shaping. "What did you tell them?" "That we're taking back our town. That Crow's men at the camp are fair game if they don't surrender." Morrison paused. "They wanted to know about you, about whether the stories are true." "What did you say?" "That I don't care who you were, only who you are now." Morrison met his eyes. Was I right? Gideon wanted to say yes, wanted to believe that 19 years of quiet living had transformed him into something better. But the truth was messier. The man he'd been was still there, buried shallow, and situations like this had a way of digging him back up. "Ask me again when this is over," he said. Morrison seemed to accept that. "The men want to know the plan. When we move, how we coordinate. Tomorrow morning, early, before dawn. We hit the camp while most of Crow's gang is preparing for the payroll ambush. Should only be 3 or 4 men there. And if there's more, then we adapt." Gideon pulled out a crude map he'd drawn earlier, showing the camp's location based on Elena's description. "We approach from 2 sides. You take half the men east, I'll take the other half west. We surround them, give them one chance to throw down weapons and walk away. And when they refuse, we make sure they can't hurt anyone else." The words were clinical, detached, made killing sound like a practical necessity rather than what it actually was, permanent and irreversible. Morrison studied the map. "What about you? Crow wants you at the pass tomorrow." "I'll be gone before dawn. He won't know until it's too late." "He'll come after you." "Let him. If Kane does his job right, Crow won't be in any position to chase anyone." Morrison folded the map carefully. "I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I." The deputy left, and Gideon was alone again with the ticking clock and his doubts. Midnight approached with inexorable certainty. Gideon banked his forge, changed into dark clothes, and waited by the back window. His old gun belt hung on a nail nearby. He'd dug it out earlier, surprised it still fit after 19 years. The weight of it felt wrong and right simultaneously. At 11:45, he saw the first flicker of orange light from behind the schoolhouse. Elena had started the fire. Shouts erupted almost immediately, people spilling into the street, pointing at the growing glow. Crow's men emerged from the saloon, from their posts, drawn by the spectacle like moths to flame. Gideon slipped out his window and into the darkness. He moved fast but careful, using the fire's distraction to cover his route. Behind him, the town was waking up, people forming bucket lines, shouting instructions. The controlled chaos was perfect cover. The terrain between town and Cooper's Pass was rough. Broken rock, scattered scrub, gullies that could snap a horse's leg. Gideon navigated from memory, grateful for the countless hours he'd spent mapping the area in his head over the years. Old habits died hard. He reached the pass just after 1 in the morning. Kane was there, working by shielded lantern light, placing small charges in cracks along the canyon wall. The prospector looked up at Gideon's approach, hand moving toward a pistol before recognition set in. "Christ, you trying to get shot?" Kane hissed. "Need to talk. Plans changed." Kane set down the charge he'd been positioning. "I'm listening." Gideon explained quickly. Crow's demand that he be present at the ambush, the timing problem, the risk of getting caught in the collapse. Kane listened without interrupting, his weathered face unreadable in the lantern light. When Gideon finished, the prospector was quiet for a long moment. Then, "So you need me to delay the charges. Wait until you're clear." Can you do it? You, technically? Sure, I can rig a longer fuse, give you time to get out of the kill zone before everything comes down. Kane pulled out a cigarette, thought better of it, given the explosives, and put it away. But there's a problem. If the shooting starts and I'm waiting for you to clear, the guards might push through the pass before I can trigger. Whole thing becomes pointless. So we need a signal, something that tells you I'm clear and the guards are in position. Like what? Gideon thought fast. Gunshot. 3 rapid shots from the East Ridge. That's me telling you I'm out and you're good to go. And if you can't get to the East Ridge, if Crow keeps you too close, then you blow it anyway. Don't wait for my signal past a certain point. If the ambush starts going bad, you drop those walls regardless. Kane's eyes narrowed. That might kill you. Better me than letting Crow walk away. Gideon meant it. If his death bought safety for Raven Hollow, that was a trade he could make. Had to make. Can you work with that? Yeah, I can work with it. Kane turned back to his charges. But Steelhand? This whole thing's a house of cards. One strong breeze and it all falls apart. I know. And you're still doing it? Don't have a choice. Kane laughed, that harsh rattling sound. We always have a choice. You're just making the hard one. He started packing his tools. I'll have everything ready by tomorrow afternoon. Charges set, fuses measured. When that payroll comes through, this canyon's going to become a grave. For the right people, I hope. Hope's not a strategy. It's all I've got. They worked together for another hour, Kane explaining the placement, the blast radius, the timing. It was technical, detailed work, and Gideon absorbed it all with the focused intensity of someone whose life depended on understanding. When they finished, false dawn was beginning to gray the eastern sky. Get back to town, Kane said, and try not to let Crow see you've been gone. Man's paranoid enough already. What about you? I'm staying here. Got a camp in the rocks, out of sight. I'll keep watch. Make sure nobody stumbles on my handiwork. Kane paused. And Steelhand? If this works, if we pull this off, I want the other $200. Cash. Not a promissory note, not an IOU. Real money. You'll get it? I better. Otherwise your ghost's going to have a lot of explaining to do. Gideon made the journey back in the growing light, taking a different route, moving faster now that visibility was improving. He reached town just as the sun was cresting the hills. The fire was out. Blackened timbers marked where the storage shed had stood, but the surrounding buildings were untouched. Elena had done her job perfectly, dramatic enough to distract, controlled enough not to spread. Gideon slipped back into his forge, through the same window he'd left, changed clothes, and was working his bellows when the first townspeople started passing by. No one seemed to notice he'd been gone. Small victories. Around 7, Crow arrived with 5 of his men. The outlaw's face was tight, angry. Hell of a night, he said. Fire woke me up, Gideon replied, not looking up from his work. Everyone all right? Everyone's fine. Shed's gone, but that's it. Crow stepped closer. Funny thing, though, my boys were watching the roads, making sure nobody tried to run, and you know what? They didn't see anyone leave. Gideon's stomach tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Why would anyone leave? That's what I'm wondering. Crow picked up a hammer, tested its weight. See, I'm a suspicious man by nature, and when there's a convenient fire right after I tell you we're riding tomorrow, well, makes me think maybe someone was using that fire as cover, maybe to slip out, maybe to interfere with my plans. You're seeing ghosts. Am I? Crow set the hammer down carefully. Then you won't mind if I search your place. Make sure you're not hiding anything. It wasn't a request. Gideon gestured at the forge. Help yourself. Crow's men spread out, searching with professional efficiency. They checked his living quarters, his tool cabinets, even the loft where he stored iron stock. Gideon watched without interfering, heart hammering but face calm. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. He'd been too careful for that. After 20 minutes, Crow called off the search. All right, maybe I am being paranoid. Maybe you are. Still, Crow's smile didn't reach his eyes. We're moving the timeline up, leaving in 2 hours instead of this afternoon, just to be safe. Gideon's mind raced. 2 hours meant no time to coordinate with Morrison, no time to finalize the attack on the camp. Everything was happening too fast. Fine by me, he said. Good. Be ready. And Vance? Crow leaned in close. I'm going to be watching you real close tomorrow. Any sign you're playing me, any hint of betrayal, and I'll gut shoot you and make you watch while we burn this town. We clear? Clear. Crow left with his men, and Gideon was alone with his accelerating pulse and shrinking options. 2 hours. He had 2 hours to get a message to Morrison, to warn Elena, to prepare for an ambush that was now happening ahead of schedule. He grabbed paper and pencil, scribbled quick notes. One for Morrison with the new timeline. One for Elena warning her to stay inside. He sealed them, then called for Noah. The kid appeared within minutes, looking tired but determined. Need you to deliver these, Gideon said, handing over the notes. Fast and subtle. Noah nodded, took the papers, and disappeared. Gideon spent the next hour preparing. He packed light, water, dried meat, his old gun belt with fresh ammunition. The pistol felt alien in his hand after so long, but the muscle memory was still there. Point, squeeze, don't jerk the trigger. Simple mechanics for ending lives. He tried not to think about it. At 9 sharp, Crow returned with his gang. All 13 men, mounted and armed heavy. They looked like what they were, professional killers preparing for work. Time to ride, Crow said. Gideon swung onto a borrowed horse, settling into the saddle with the ease of someone who'd spent years on horseback. The gang surrounded him, not obviously guarding, but positioned so he couldn't bolt without going through at least 3 men. They rode out of Raven Hollow in a column, and Gideon felt a dozen eyes watching from windows and doorways, watching him leave with the enemy, wondering if he was betrayer or savior. He wasn't sure himself. The ride to Cooper's Pass took 3 hours at the pace Crow set. The outlaw kept them moving but not rushing, preserving the horses for the getaway. Smart. Everything Crow did was smart, which made him dangerous. They reached the pass around noon and took positions exactly as Gideon had suggested. Men on both ridges, rifles ready, horses hidden in a side canyon. The setup was textbook ambush doctrine, which meant when Kane brought the walls down, they'd all be in the kill zone, including Gideon. Crow positioned himself on the south ridge with Gideon beside him. Payroll's due through in about 3 hours, the outlaw said, checking his pocket watch. We wait quiet. Let them get deep into the canyon, then open up. Fast and brutal. They'll panic, and we take them easy. Sounds solid, Gideon said, scanning the rocks for any sign of Kane. Nothing. The prospector was good at staying hidden. You seem calm, Crow observed. Been in worse situations. Like Blackwater? The name hit like a punch. Gideon kept his face neutral. That was a long time ago. Not that long. 19 years isn't forever. Crow leaned back against a rock, casual. You ever think about that day? About the people who died? Every day. Guilt's a heavy thing to carry. It is. Is that why you stopped? Why you walked away from who you were? Crow's voice was almost gentle. Couldn't live with the blood? Gideon didn't answer. I get it, Crow continued. Man does enough killing, starts to weigh on him. Makes him wonder if maybe he's the problem. He pulled out a cigar, lit it. But here's what I learned. Guilt's just weakness. Regret's just fear. And the only thing that matters is staying alive long enough to enjoy what you've taken. That's one philosophy. It's the only philosophy that works. Crow blew smoke toward the sky. You're going to have to choose soon, Vance. You can keep pretending you're something you're not, or you can accept what you are and stop apologizing for it. And what am I? A killer who tried to retire. Crow smiled. But retirement doesn't take. The skills don't fade. The instincts don't die. You're still Steelhand Vance under all that blacksmith dirt. Question is, when are you going to admit it? Before Gideon could respond, one of the lookouts whistled softly. Crow went still, listening. Another whistle, the signal. The payroll was coming. Crow stubbed out his cigar and stood, checking his pistols. Around them, the gang readied weapons with practiced silence. Gideon's hand moved to his own gun, and the weight felt inevitable. Down in the canyon, dust rose from the approaching convoy. 6 riders like Crow had predicted, surrounding a heavy wagon. Guards with rifles, alert but not expecting trouble. They were riding into a death trap, and Gideon was part of it. He thought about Elena's words in the church. Stop punishing yourself for old sins and focus on the problem in front of us. Thought about Noah's determination, about Morrison's willingness to fight despite his fear. They were counting on him, trusting him. which meant he couldn't afford to fail. Crow raised his hand, preparing to give the signal. His men tensed, fingers on triggers. The payroll entered the narrowest part of the pass. Gideon made his choice. He drew his pistol, but instead of aiming at the guards below, he turned and pressed the barrel against Crow's ribs. "Don't," he said quietly. Crow froze. Around them, the gang hadn't noticed yet. They were focused on the canyon below. "That's a mistake," Crow said, voice perfectly level. "Maybe. But I'm done making the ones you want me to make. My men will kill you. Probably, but you'll be dead first, and without you, they're just a gang. No leadership, no plan." Gideon pressed the gun harder. "Call it off. Signal them to stand down." "Or what? You shoot me and we all die when my boys open fire? Better than living as the thing you think I am." For a long moment, Crow didn't move. The payroll was almost through the pass now, seconds from being clear. Then Crow smiled. "You're bluffing. You don't have the stomach for it anymore." Gideon pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening in the confined space. Crow jerked sideways, blood blooming on his shoulder. Not a kill shot, but enough to drop him. The gang erupted into chaos. Men spinning, trying to figure out what happened, where the shot came from. Gideon was already moving. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession toward the east ridge, the signal for Kane, then dove for cover as bullets started chewing up the rocks where he'd been standing. The canyon walls exploded. Kane's charges went off in sequence, a rolling thunder that shook the earth. Massive chunks of rock separated from the cliff faces and tumbled downward in a roar of destruction. The guards below spurred their horses into desperate flight, racing to escape the avalanche. Most made it. One didn't. His horse stumbled and both went down under tons of falling stone. But it was Crow's gang that took the worst of it. The men on the ridges had nowhere to run. The collapse caught them where they stood, swallowing 3 men whole and scattering the others like toys. Gideon scrambled through the chaos, trying to reach the horses. Behind him, Crow was shouting orders through pain, trying to rally his surviving men. A bullet cracked past Gideon's head, too close. He turned and fired back blind, just trying to create space. The canyon was a nightmare of dust and falling rock and screaming men. Gideon couldn't see 10 feet through the debris cloud. He stumbled over something soft, a body, one of the gang members crushed by the collapse. Hoofbeats pounded somewhere to his left. He ran toward them, found the side canyon where they'd hidden the horses. Half the animals were gone, panicked into flight by the explosions. The rest were wild-eyed and fighting their tethers. Gideon grabbed the nearest horse, cut it free, and threw himself into the saddle. The animal reared, and he fought it down with hands that remembered this from another life. More shots. Someone had spotted him. He spurred the horse and it lunged forward, terrified and fast. Behind him, voices shouted through the settling dust, Crow's voice among them, harsh with pain and rage. But Gideon was already gone, riding hard away from the pass, away from the ambush, toward Raven Hollow and whatever came next. The plan had worked, sort of. Crow was alive. Most of his gang was dead or scattered, but the man himself had survived, and wounded animals were the most dangerous kind. Gideon rode through the afternoon, pushing the horse harder than he should. Behind him, Cooper's Pass was a ruin of broken stone and broken men. Ahead, Raven Hollow waited, unaware that war was riding toward it. He reached the town's outskirts just as the sun touched the horizon, slowed the exhausted horse to a walk, and that's when he saw the smoke. Not from the forge, not from the schoolhouse, from the center of town. Something was burning. Gideon's blood turned to ice. He kicked the horse into one last gallop, racing toward the smoke, toward his worst fear made real. Had Morrison attacked the camp early? Had something gone wrong? He rounded the corner onto Main Street and pulled up short. The saloon was on fire, flames punching through the roof, and in front of it 3 bodies lay in the dirt, not moving. Morrison appeared from an alley, his shirt torn and bloody. When he saw Gideon, something like relief crossed his face. "You're alive," the deputy said. What happened?" "Crow's men, the ones he left in camp, they came into town an hour ago." Morrison gestured at the burning saloon. "Said they were celebrating early. Got drunk? Started trouble? When I tried to calm things down," he stopped, swallowed hard. "It went bad fast. The men I asked you to recruit? 2 of them are dead, the body's there." Morrison's voice was hollow. "Third one's at Doc Warren's. Might not make it." Gideon felt the weight of those deaths settle on his shoulders. Good men, dead because he'd asked them to fight. Where are the others? Crow's men? Barricaded in the general store. They've got hostages. Alma Pritchard and her daughter. Morrison's hand shook as he wiped blood from his face. I tried to negotiate, but they're not listening. They know something went wrong at the pass. They're scared and mean, and his voice cracked. I don't know what to do. Gideon looked at the burning saloon, the dead men, the chaos his plan had created. Elena's words echoed again. This town needs that man. Not the one who'd spent 19 years hiding, the one who'd survived things that would have killed weaker people. Gideon dismounted slowly, pulled his pistol, checked the ammunition. Get everyone off the street, he said. Anyone who can't fight, get them somewhere safe. What are you going to do? Gideon started walking toward the general store, his stride measured, purposeful. The setting sun painted long shadows across Main Street, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he registered that he'd walked toward death like this before. The difference was, this time he wasn't running away from who he was. He was running toward who he needed to be. The general store sat dark against the dying light, its windows shuttered from inside. Gideon could see movement through the gaps, shadows shifting, nervous energy. 3 men, maybe 4, holed up with 2 hostages and nowhere to run. Cornered animals. He stopped 50 feet out, close enough to be heard but far enough that a panicked shot would likely miss. Behind him, Morrison had cleared the street. Faces watched from windows, doorways, the whole town holding its breath. You in the store? Gideon called out. I'm coming in to talk. A voice answered, rough with whiskey and fear. Stay back, or the women die. I don't think you want to do that. Yeah? Why not? Because killing hostages is the only card you've got left. You play it now, you've got nothing to negotiate with. Gideon kept his voice level, reasonable. Let me come in. We'll figure this out. Silence. Then glass breaking. Someone smashing out a window with a rifle barrel. Your Vance! The voice was closer now, shouting from the broken window. The blacksmith. Crow said you were helping us. Plans changed. No shit! Bitter laughter. Where's Crow? Where's Dutch and the others? Gideon didn't answer immediately. Let the silence stretch. Let their imaginations fill in the worst. Dead or running, he said finally. Ambush went bad. You're what's left. More silence. Gideon could hear urgent whispers inside, men arguing, scared voices trying to figure out their next move. Then we got nothing to lose, the voice said. We're dead anyway. Maybe. Or maybe you walk out of here breathing. Gideon took a slow step forward. Depends on the next 10 minutes. You trying to negotiate? You ain't law. You're just a blacksmith. I'm the man standing between you and everyone in this town who wants you dead. That makes me the best friend you've got right now. Another whispered argument inside. Then a different voice, younger, shakier. How do we know you won't just shoot us? You don't, but I'm offering you a chance, more than you gave those men in the street. Gideon gestured at the bodies still lying where they'd fallen. Let the women go. Come out unarmed. You'll live to see tomorrow. To hang, you mean? For what we done? Maybe. But hanging's quick. What happens if this town decides to handle justice themselves? That won't be. Gideon let that sink in. I've seen lynch mobs. They don't hurry. Think about that before you decide your next move. The whispers inside grew more agitated. Gideon waited, gun loose at his side, counting heartbeats. His own pulse was steady, calm. The old training coming back like he'd never stopped. 15 seconds. 30. A minute. Then the front door cracked open. Alma Pritchard stumbled out first, her face pale but composed. Her daughter followed, younger, crying quietly. They ran toward Morrison's position without looking back. 2 hostages safe. Progress. Guns next, Gideon called. Toss them out slow. Pistols, rifles, knives, everything. More hesitation. Then weapons started coming through the broken window. 2 pistols, a rifle, another pistol, a shotgun. That all of it? Yeah. You sure? Because if I come in there and find someone still armed, the deal's off. A pause. Then one more pistol tumbled into the dirt. Now come out, hands where I can see them. The door opened wider and 3 men emerged. Not 4. 3. Gideon recognized them from around town over the past days, hard cases with eyes that had seen too much and cared too little. The youngest couldn't have been more than 22. The oldest was maybe 40, with a scar running jaw to temple. They stood in the street, hands raised, looking at Gideon with expressions ranging from defiance to terror. "On your knees," Gideon said. They complied slowly, reluctantly. Morrison appeared with rope, started binding their hands behind them. The deputy's face was hard, unforgiving. He wanted to hurt them. Gideon could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "Deputy," Gideon said quietly. "Easy." Morrison shot him a look. "These men killed— I know what they did, but we're better than them, remember that." Morrison's jaw worked, but he finished tying the prisoners without unnecessary roughness. Small victory. Gideon turned to the 3 bound men. "Where's the 4th?" "What 4th?" The scarred one tried for defiant. It came out nervous. "You had 4 men in camp this morning. Only 3 came out of that store." The youngest broke first. "Bobby ran. When the shooting started, he just took off. Headed north, I think." "Great. 1 man loose, probably heading toward wherever Crow had regrouped. More complications." "Get them locked up," Gideon told Morrison. "Whatever passes for a jail cell in this town. Post a guard. 2 guards. And for the love of—" He stopped himself. "Don't let anyone near them who lost someone today. Not yet." Morrison nodded and hauled the prisoners away with help from Thomas Reed and another townsman. Gideon watched them go, then turned toward the burning saloon. The fire was spreading now, reaching for the buildings on either side. People were fighting it with bucket lines, but it was a losing battle. The saloon was too far gone. Elena appeared at his elbow. Her face was smudged with soot, her dress torn at the hem. "You're back," she said. "Yeah." "Crow?" "Alive. Wounded. Lost most of his men, but he got away." Gideon watched the flames eat through dry timber. "He'll be coming. Tonight, probably. Tomorrow at the latest." "How many men does he have left?" "Hard to say. Maybe 4 or 5 who weren't at the pass. Plus whoever survived the collapse." Gideon did rough math. "Call it 6 to 8 total. Less than he started with, but enough to burn us out if we're not ready." Elena absorbed this without flinching. "What do we do? Prepare. Fortify. Make this town a hard target instead of an easy one." He looked at her directly. "And we hope Morrison's jail holds until the territorial marshal gets here." "That's optimistic." "Optimism's all I've got left." She almost smiled. "Liar." The fire burned itself out around midnight, leaving a blackened shell where the saloon had stood. 3 buildings total destroyed, 2 more damaged. Could have been worse, but that was cold comfort to the people who'd lost their livelihoods. Gideon spent the dark hours organizing defense. He positioned men at key points around town, the approaches from north and south, the ridge overlooking Main Street, anywhere Crow might attack from. They weren't soldiers, but they were motivated. Fear made for good discipline when nothing else would. Morrison handled the tactical positioning while Gideon worked his forge. Not horseshoes this time. Barricades. Steel plates that could be fitted over windows, reinforcements for doors, anything that might slow bullets or fire. Noah appeared around 2 in the morning, looking exhausted but determined. "Pa said I should stay home," the kid said. "I came anyway." "Your pa's probably right." "Maybe, but I'm here." Noah picked up a hammer without asking. "What needs doing?" Gideon showed him. They worked in companionable silence. The ring of metal on metal, the only sound besides the occasional crackle from the ruined saloon. Around 3, Pastor Daniels arrived with coffee. The small man looked diminished somehow, like the violence had physically shrunk him. "I've been praying," he said, handing Gideon a cup. "That's kind of you." "Not kind. Necessary." Daniels watched the forge glow. "I keep thinking about those men who died, about their families, about how we failed to protect them. We didn't fail. Crow's men did what they did. That's on them, not us." "Is it?" The pastor's voice was soft. "We knew they were dangerous. We knew violence was coming, and we still let good men walk into harm's way." Gideon set down his hammer. "You want someone to blame? Blame me. I asked those men to fight. I told them we could win." Their blood's on my hands, not yours. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is, and you're right. Gideon met the pastor's eyes. I made choices. People died. Now I have to live with that. But right now, I need to focus on making sure no one else joins them. You understand? Daniels nodded slowly. What can I do? Keep people calm. Keep them from panicking. When Crow comes, and he will come, we need everyone thinking clearly. That's your job. Can you do it? I'll try. That's all any of us can do. The pastor left with his coffee, and Gideon returned to his work. Beside him, Noah hammered away at a steel plate, his young face set with concentration. Mr. Vance? The kid's voice was quiet. You think we're going to make it? Gideon wanted to lie, to offer reassurance, but Noah had earned honesty. I don't know. We've got numbers and preparation on our side, but Crow's got experience and nothing to lose. Could go either way. You scared? Terrified. Noah looked surprised. You don't act scared. Acting's easy. Feeling's harder. Gideon examined the plate Noah had been working on, nodded approval. But being scared isn't the same as being defeated. Remember that. Dawn broke gray and cold, bringing with it the kind of clarity that only comes from sleepless nights. Gideon surveyed his work with tired eyes. The town looked like a fortress now. Barricades, defensive positions, armed men at every approach. Not perfect, but better than they'd had yesterday. Morrison found him as the sun cleared the hills. Scouts spotted riders, the deputy said. North Road, maybe half a dozen, moving slow. Gideon's stomach tightened. That's them. What do we do? We wait. Let them come to us. Fighting ground of our choosing, not theirs. Gideon checked his pistol, reloaded the one chamber he'd fired. Get everyone in position, non-combatants in the church basement, armed men at their posts. No one shoots until I give the word. And if they have Crow with them? Especially if they have Crow. Man's wounded and angry. That makes him unpredictable. Gideon paused. But it also makes him vulnerable. Pain slows you down, clouds judgment. We can use that. Morrison hurried off to spread the word. Gideon climbed to the roof of his forge, the highest point on Main Street, and waited. They came into view 20 minutes later. 7 riders, not 6. Crow rode point despite his shoulder wound, his left arm bound tight against his body. The others spread around him, hard men who'd survived the pass, who'd seen their gang destroyed and wanted revenge. They stopped just outside rifle range and sat their horses, studying the town. Gideon could see Crow talking to the others, pointing, planning. The outlaw's face was pale with blood loss, but his eyes were alert, calculating. After 5 minutes of this, Crow spurred forward alone, rode to the edge of town and dismounted carefully, favoring his injured side. Vance! His voice carried in the morning quiet. I know you're there. Come out and talk. Gideon climbed down from his roof and walked into the street. Behind barricades and around corners, he felt his people watching, waiting. He stopped 30 feet from Crow. You look terrible, Gideon said. Crow laughed, though it came out strained. You shot me, you son of a bitch. That tends to affect a man's appearance. He shifted, wincing. Lost 8 good men at that pass. 8. You know what that costs? Less than you deserved. Maybe so. Crow's good hand rested on his pistol. But here's the thing about costs. Someone's got to pay them. And right now, I'm thinking that someone is you and everyone in this miserable town. You're outnumbered and wounded. Walk away while you still can. Walk away. Crow's voice rose. You humiliated me, destroyed my reputation. Men will hear about Cooper's Pass, how Silas Crow got played by a washed-up blacksmith. His face flushed with anger. I can't walk away from that. Won't. Then you'll die here. Probably. Crow drew his pistol with his good hand but didn't raise it, just held it loose at his side. But I'll take as many of you with me as I can, starting with you. He brought the gun up fast, faster than Gideon expected from a wounded man. But Gideon had been waiting for it. His own draw was pure reflex, muscle memory from another life. The pistol seemed to jump into his hand and he was firing before conscious thought caught up. The first shot took Crow in the chest, center mass. The second went high, punching through his throat. Crow staggered, blood pouring from both wounds. His pistol dropped from nerveless fingers. He looked at Gideon with something like surprise, mouth working but no sound coming out. Then he fell. The gunshot shattered the morning stillness like glass. Crow's remaining men reacted instantly, spurring forward, weapons up, murder in their eyes, and Raven Hollow erupted. Rifles cracked from windows and rooftops. Shotguns boomed from behind barricades. Morrison's voice was shouting commands, coordinating fire. The sound was deafening, chaotic. 2 of Crow's men went down immediately, caught in the crossfire. A third made it to Main Street before taking a bullet through the leg and tumbling from his saddle. The remaining 4 scattered, seeking cover, trying to return fire. But they were in the open and Raven Hollow had prepared. Every angle was covered, every approach watched. Gideon ran for his forge, taking cover behind the thick stone walls. Bullets whined past, chipping wood and stone. One caught a water barrel near his head and it exploded, drenching him in cold water. He fired back methodically, picking targets. Saw one man trying to flank around the general store and put a bullet through his shoulder. The man dropped, screaming. The fight lasted maybe 3 minutes but felt like hours. Smoke filled the street, making visibility impossible. Gideon couldn't tell who was winning, could only react to movement and sound. Then, as suddenly as it started, the shooting stopped. The silence rang in Gideon's ears. He stayed behind cover, listening. Heard groaning, crying, the shuffle of boots on dirt, but no more gunfire. Morrison's voice called out, "They're down! All of them!" Gideon emerged slowly, gun ready. The street was carnage, bodies and blood and wounded men trying to crawl away. Some of Crow's gang, some townspeople. The cost of survival written in red across the dirt. He walked to where Crow had fallen. The outlaw lay on his back, eyes open but seeing nothing. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and spreading. Gideon had killed men before, more than he could count, but it never got easier. Each death was its own weight, its own burden to carry. Elena appeared beside him, looking at the body. "Is it over?" she asked. "Yeah, it's over." But even as he said it, Gideon knew that wasn't quite true. The immediate threat was gone, but the consequences would ripple outward for years. The families of the dead, the trauma of the survivors, the questions that would follow. Was this justice or just more violence? He didn't have answers, wasn't sure there were any. Morrison was organizing the cleanup, getting the wounded to Doc Warren, securing the prisoners. The deputy moved with purpose, and Gideon saw something different in him now. Not the idealistic lawman from 3 days ago, but someone who'd been tested and survived. Whether that was growth or just damage, time would tell. Townspeople emerged from their shelters, faces showing relief and shock in equal measure. Some were crying. Others just stood silent, trying to process what had happened. Thomas Reed found his son helping move bodies and pulled Noah into a fierce embrace. The boy didn't resist, just held on to his father and shook. Gideon watched them and felt something twist in his chest. Noah had survived. They all had survived. But at what cost? He looked down at his hands. They were steady, competent. The hands of a killer who'd tried to become something else and failed. Or maybe not failed. Maybe just learned that some transformations were never complete. "You did what had to be done," Elena said quietly beside him. "Did I? Or did I just prove Crow right?" Gideon holstered his pistol. "He said I was still Steelhand Vance underneath, that the skills don't fade. Looks like he was right. He was wrong about one thing, though." "What's that?" "You're not the same man you were. That man would have killed Crow the moment he rode into town. Would have hunted down his gang and ended this before it started." Elena looked at him directly. "You tried every other option first. You only became that man when there was no choice left. That's different." Gideon wanted to believe her. Wanted to think 19 years had changed him fundamentally. But the ease with which he'd drawn, aimed, fired, that scared him more than Crow's threats ever had. Because it meant the blacksmith was just a costume he wore. Underneath, he was still the same person who'd left bodies across 3 territories. "Come on," Elena said, tugging his arm gently. "Doc Warren needs help with the wounded, and afterward, you need sleep. You look like hell. Feel worse." "I believe it." They walked together toward the makeshift hospital Doc Warren had set up in the church. Behind them, Main Street was slowly returning to something like normal. People cleaning up, repairing damage, beginning the long process of moving forward. Raven Hollow had survived. The question was what they'd become in the process. Night fell again, bringing exhaustion and uneasy quiet. Gideon sat outside his forge, too tired to sleep, watching the stars emerge. His body ached from exertion and tension. His hands smelled like gunpowder no amount of washing could remove. Morrison approached, carrying 2 bottles. Whiskey. "Figured you could use this," the deputy said, offering one. Gideon took it, pulled the cork, drank. The liquor burned going down, but he welcomed it. They sat in silence for a while, passing the bottle back and forth. "I killed a man today," Morrison said finally. "Shot him while he was trying to reload. He looked right at me when I pulled the trigger, looked scared. They usually do. How do you live with it, knowing you ended someone?" Gideon considered the question. "You don't. Not really. You just carry it. Add it to all the other weight. Hope it doesn't break you before you find something worth carrying it for." Morrison absorbed this. "Was it worth it? What we did?" "Ask me in a year. Right now I'm too close to see clearly." They drank in silence again. Around them, Raven Hollow slept fitfully, troubled by the day's violence. "The territorial marshal's going to have questions," Morrison said, "about Crow, about the prisoners, about all of it." "Let him ask. We defended our town. That's all the answer he needs." "Is it, though? We killed 7 men, executed Crow in the street." "I executed Crow. He drew first. Self-defense." Gideon took another drink. "The others, that was a fight they started. We finished it. The law might not like how we handled things, but they weren't here. We were." Morrison seemed to accept this. He finished his bottle, set it aside carefully. "I'm glad you were here," he said. "Don't think we would have made it without you." "You would have found a way." "No, we wouldn't." Morrison stood, steadying himself. "Get some rest, Vance. You've earned it." He walked away into the darkness, leaving Gideon alone with his thoughts and his guilt. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles. Gideon sat and watched them, drinking slowly, thinking about everything and nothing. Somewhere in the night, a dog barked. A baby cried, life continuing despite death's visit. And Gideon Vance, the man who'd tried to stop being Steelhand, sat in the ruins of his peaceful existence and wondered if redemption was even possible, or if some stains just never washed out, no matter how hard you scrubbed. The bottle was empty by the time Gideon finally went inside. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by sounds that weren't there, gunshots, screams, Crow's wet breathing as he died. Around 4 in the morning, Gideon gave up trying and went back to his forge. The coals were dead, cold for the first time in days. He stared at them for a long moment, then started the slow process of rebuilding the fire. Some things you couldn't rush. Dawn found him working on a simple door hinge, the kind of mundane task that kept his hands busy and his mind from wandering too far into dark places. The hammer felt good, familiar. Each strike was a promise that normal still existed somewhere beneath the blood and chaos. Elena appeared as the sun cleared the eastern hills. She looked like she'd slept about as well as he had, which was to say, not at all. "The marshal's here," she said without preamble. Gideon set down his hammer. That was fast. Someone must have sent word yesterday. He rode in with 4 deputies about 20 minutes ago. Morrison's giving him the story now. How's Morrison holding up? Better than expected. He's got that rigid lawman thing working for him. Presents the facts. Doesn't apologize. Doesn't elaborate. Elena leaned against the doorframe. "The marshal wants to talk to you next." "I bet he does." Gideon wiped his hands, removed his apron. Might as well get it over with. They walked together through town. Raven Hollow looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, more vulnerable. The burned buildings stood as black monuments to what had happened. Bloodstains still marked the dirt in places, though someone had tried to cover them with fresh earth. People were out and working, repairing damage, sweeping debris. But the energy was subdued, cautious, like everyone was waiting for the next disaster. The marshal had set up in what passed for Morrison's office, a single room with a desk and 2 cells. He was a big man, maybe 50, with gray threading through his beard and eyes that had seen enough frontier violence to recognize it when he saw it again. "You're Vance," he said when Gideon entered. Not a question. "That's right. Marshal William Keating, Territorial Authority." He gestured at a chair. "Sit. We need to talk about what happened here." Gideon sat. Keating studied him for a long moment, then leaned back in Morrison's chair. Your deputy gave me the basics. Gang of outlaws threatened the town, demanded cooperation with a payroll robbery. You organized resistance. That about sum it up? Close enough. He also mentioned you have a history, that you used to be someone else. Keating's expression didn't change. Someone with a reputation. 19 years ago, yeah, I was someone else. Steelhand Vance. I've heard the name. Heard the stories too, most of which are probably exaggerated, but still. The marshal pulled out a pipe, began packing it with tobacco. Want to tell me why a legendary gunfighter's been hiding in a nowhere town making horseshoes? Because I was tired of killing people. Keating lit his pipe, puffed thoughtfully. Yet, here we are. 7 more men dead, 3 in custody. Doesn't sound like retirement worked out. They didn't give me much choice. There's always a choice. Smoke curled toward the ceiling. Question is whether you made the right one. Gideon felt anger flare, tamped it down. You saying we should have let Crow burn the town? I'm saying there are procedures, laws, ways to handle these situations that don't involve street executions and amateur ambushes. Keating's voice was mild but firm. I'm saying that vigilante justice, no matter how justified it feels in the moment, tends to create more problems than it solves. So what should we have done? Sent a polite letter asking Crow to wait 3 days while you rode here? You could have evacuated, could have moved people to safety and let me handle it, and abandoned everything we'd built? Our homes, our businesses, our lives? Gideon shook his head. That's easy to say when it's not your town being threatened. Keating puffed his pipe, considering. I'm not unsympathetic to your position. Frontier life is hard and sometimes the law can't arrive fast enough. But the line between self-defense and murder gets blurry when you're the one drawing it. Crow drew first. I've got witnesses. I know. Morrison told me. And I believe him. He doesn't strike me as a liar. The marshal set his pipe aside. But Vance, here's my concern. You've got a history of violence. You organized this whole operation, from the ambush at the pass to the defense of the town. A good prosecutor could argue you were looking for an excuse to go back to your old ways. That's garbage and you know it. Maybe. But perception matters. And right now, the perception is that a notorious killer set up an elaborate trap that got a lot of people dead. Keating leaned forward. I need to be able to tell my superiors this was legitimate self-defense, that you exhausted all other options. Can you give me that? Gideon thought about the past 4 days. The failed negotiations, the attempts to find peaceful solutions, the desperation that drove each decision. Yeah, he said finally. I can give you that. We tried everything else first. Crow wouldn't take money, wouldn't take promises, wouldn't take anything except submission or destruction. We chose a third option. Fighting. Surviving. Keating studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll file this as justifiable action in defense of the community. The territorial governor won't love it, but he'll accept it. He picked up his pipe again. But Vance, you need to understand something. This was a one-time exception. Next time, if there is a next time, you follow proper procedure. Contact the law, wait for help, don't take matters into your own hands. Clear? Crystal. Good. The marshal stood, extended his hand. For what it's worth, you probably saved a lot of lives. Just try to do it legally next time. Gideon shook his hand and left, feeling the weight of judgment he hadn't quite escaped. Outside, Elena was waiting. How bad? Could be worse. He's calling it justified, but I'm officially on notice. No more vigilante heroics. Can you live with that? Don't plan on needing to find out. They walked back toward the forge in silence. Around them, Raven Hollow continued its slow recovery. Gideon saw families reuniting, saw Doc Warren making his rounds, saw normal life trying to reassert itself against the chaos. But he also saw the gaps. The 3 men who'd died defending the town, the buildings reduced to ash, the children who'd watched violence unfold in their safe haven. Those scars wouldn't heal quickly. I'm leaving, Elena said suddenly. Gideon stopped walking. What? Not permanently, just for a while. She wouldn't meet his eyes. I have a sister in Denver. Haven't seen her in years, figured now's a good time. Running away? Taking a breath, her voice was sharp. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. She finally looked at him. I watched men die this week, Gideon. Watched you kill someone in the street. That's not something I can just move past like it didn't happen. I need distance. Need to figure out how I feel about all of it. He wanted to argue, to tell her they could work through it together, but he understood the impulse to flee better than most. How long? A month? Maybe 2. She touched his arm briefly. I'm not abandoning you. I need to not be here for a while. I get it. Do you? Yeah. I've been running from things my whole life. I know what it looks like. Elena's expression softened slightly. I'll be back. The school needs a teacher, and these kids deserve better than what they've seen lately. She paused. And I want to see what happens next, whether the blacksmith or the gunfighter wins out. They're the same person. Maybe, but one builds things and one destroys them. Time will tell which one you choose to be. She left him standing in the street, and Gideon felt the loneliness settle around his shoulders like an old coat. The next week passed in a blur of testimony and bureaucracy. The marshal interviewed everyone, collected statements, documented everything in triplicate. The 3 surviving prisoners were transported to the territorial capital for trial. No one expected them to avoid the noose. Crow and his men were buried in the hard ground north of town, unmarked graves that would be forgotten within a generation. Gideon didn't attend, didn't see the point in watching Earth cover mistakes. The town's dead got proper funerals. Pastor Daniels presided, his voice breaking as he talked about sacrifice and duty and the price of freedom. The words were nice, but empty. Dead men didn't care about platitudes. Gideon stood in the back during the services, hat in hand, and counted the cost of his decisions. 3 good men, 5 wounded badly enough to question whether they'd fully recover. A town traumatized and forever changed. And for what? Safety that might last a year, maybe 2, before the next threat rode over the horizon? After the last funeral, Morrison found him. People want to thank you, the deputy said. Town council's talking about some kind of ceremony, recognition for what you did. Tell them no. Vance, I said no. I don't want recognition. Don't want gratitude. I just want to be left alone. Gideon started walking away, then stopped. Those men who died. Make sure their families are taken care of. Find out what they need, send me the bill. That could be expensive. I've got money saved. Use it for something that matters. Morrison watched him go, and Gideon felt the deputy's confusion like a weight. People expected heroes to act certain ways, to accept praise, to bask in glory, to play the part. But Gideon had never been good at performance. He'd just been good at surviving. 3 weeks after the fight, Josiah Kane appeared. The prospector looked exactly the same, weathered, cynical, unimpressed by civilization. He found Gideon at the forge and dropped a canvas bag on the workbench. What's this? Gideon asked. Salvage from Cooper's Pass. Guns, equipment, personal effects from Crow's men. Kane pulled out a cigarette, lit it. Figured you might want first pick before I sell the rest. Keep it, sell it all. You sure? There's good stuff here. Quality weapons, some cash. I don't want anything that belonged to them. Gideon returned to his work. You came for your money. That was the deal. 200 more, you said. Gideon pulled an envelope from his coat, handed it over. Kane counted the bills carefully, then nodded. Pleasure doing business. He started to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you did good. Could have gone a lot worse. Tell that to the men who died. They knew the risks, made their choices. Kane blew smoke toward the ceiling. You can't save everyone, Steelhand. Sooner you accept that, the easier it gets. Does it? No. But at least you stop expecting it to. Kane tipped his hat. Take care of yourself. He left, and Gideon was alone again with his guilt and his hammer. A month passed, then another. Elena's letters arrived weekly, chatty, warm, carefully avoiding any mention of when she might return. Gideon wrote back with updates about the town, the forge, the weather. Safe topics that didn't require examining feelings too closely. Raven Hollow slowly returned to something approximating normal. The burned buildings were rebuilt. The bloodstains faded. Children played in the streets again, though their games now sometimes involved outlaws and gunfights, innocent minds processing trauma the only way they knew how. Noah continued his apprenticeship, showing real talent for the work. His father stopped glaring at Gideon, which felt like progress. Small steps toward forgiveness. Morrison grew into his role as deputy, earning respect through steady competence rather than dramatic gestures. He and Gideon developed an easy partnership, not quite friendship, but mutual respect built on shared experience. And Gideon worked his forge day after day, trying to find peace in the rhythm of creation. But the peace remained elusive. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd proven Crow right, that underneath the blacksmith's apron and the quiet life, he was still the same killer who'd left bodies across 3 territories. The ease with which he'd drawn on Crow haunted him. No hesitation, no mercy, just cold efficiency. What did that say about 19 years of trying to change? On a cold morning in late autumn, nearly 4 months after the fight, Gideon was working on a commission, a decorative gate for the new town hall, when he heard footsteps. He looked up to find a young man standing in his doorway, maybe 25, with hard eyes and a gun belt worn low and professional. "Help you?" Gideon asked, already knowing the answer. "You're Steel Hand Vance." Not a question. "I'm Gideon Vance, blacksmith. Don't play games." The young man stepped inside, hand near his pistol. "I heard what happened here. Heard how you killed Silas Crow and his whole gang. That true?" "We defended ourselves against outlaws. The territorial marshal has a full report if you're interested." "I'm not interested in reports. I'm interested in you." The young man's voice carried an edge of challenge. "See, I've been practicing, been working on my draw, my aim, and I figure if I can take down the man who killed Steel Hand Vance, that makes me the fastest gun in 3 territories. Gideon set down his hammer carefully. "I'm not Steel Hand Vance. Not anymore. We both know that's a lie. And we both know you don't actually want to do this. You're scared trying to make a name. But son, there's no glory in gunfighting, just death. Walk away while you can." The young man's face flushed. "You calling me a coward?" "I'm calling you young and stupid. There's a difference, but the result's the same if you draw on me." "Then I guess we'll find out." The young man's hand moved toward his gun, and Gideon drew. It was instinct, reflex. The pistol jumped into his hand like it belonged there, and he was aiming before thought caught up. But he didn't fire. The young man had frozen, his gun only halfway clear of the holster. He stared at Gideon's pistol, pointed steady at his chest, and all the bravado drained from his face. "You're fast," he whispered. "Fast enough that you'd be dead right now if I wanted you to be." Gideon lowered his gun slowly. "But I don't. So I'm going to give you a choice. You can finish your draw and we'll both find out if you're faster than you think. Or you can walk away, find some other way to prove yourself, and maybe live long enough to realize reputation isn't worth dying for." The young man's hand trembled on his pistol grip. For a long moment, Gideon thought he might actually draw anyway. Pride and stupidity often went hand in hand. Then the hand dropped. "I'm sorry," the young man said quietly. People talk. Say you're the real thing. I wanted to see." "Now you've seen. Was it worth the risk?" "No, sir." "Good. Learn from that." Gideon holstered his own weapon. "You're skilled enough to be dangerous. Use those skills for something that matters instead of chasing ghosts." The young man nodded and left, walking quickly, shoulders hunched with embarrassment. Gideon stood alone in his forge, staring at his hands. They were steady, completely calm, like they'd been waiting 19 years to do exactly what they'd just done. Elena's question echoed in his mind, whether the blacksmith or the gunfighter wins out. He'd just proven he was still both. The skills hadn't faded. The instincts remained sharp. He could probably outdraw most men who challenged him, but he'd also chosen not to kill. Had given the kid a chance when Steel Hand Vance would have ended it without hesitation. Maybe that was the difference. Not whether you had violence in you, but whether you let it define you. That evening, he walked to the cemetery north of town. The graves of Raven Hollow's defenders were marked with simple wooden crosses. Someone, probably Morrison, had carved their names carefully. James Fletcher, Robert Tate, Samuel Corrigan. 3 men who'd fought because Gideon asked them to. He stood there as the sun set, trying to find words that meant something, trying to justify their deaths in his mind. "I'm sorry," he said finally. You deserved better than this. Deserved a leader who knew what he was doing. Deserved to survive. The Graves offered no absolution. I can't bring you back, can't undo what happened, but I can promise you this. What you did mattered. This town's still standing because you were brave enough to fight for it. Your families are safe because you stood when others might have run. He paused. I know that doesn't make it right. Doesn't balance the scales, but it's the only truth I've got. He stayed until full dark, then walked back to town alone. Morrison was waiting at the forge. Heard about the kid who challenged you, the deputy said. Word travels fast. Too fast. Probably not the last. People hear stories, want to test themselves against the legend. Gideon had feared as much. Then I'll deal with them as they come. Or you could leave. Start over somewhere they haven't heard of Steelhand Vance. Tried that once. Didn't take. Morrison smiled slightly. Elena's coming back next week. Sent a telegram today. Something loosened in Gideon's chest. She'd say why. Said she'd figured some things out. Said this town needed a teacher and you needed someone to keep you honest. Morrison stood to leave. For what it's worth, I think you've been plenty honest. Maybe too honest. Most men would have taken the hero treatment and run with it. I'm not most men. No, you're not. Morrison tipped his hat. See you tomorrow, Vance. Alone again, Gideon returned to his work. The decorative gate was nearly finished, intricate scrollwork surrounding a central design he'd been planning for weeks. He worked through the night, losing himself in the details. And as dawn broke, he stepped back to examine the completed piece. The gate showed a tree with deep roots and spreading branches. Strong, stable, permanent. But around the edges, if you looked close, you could see smaller details. Birds taking flight, leaves falling, new growth emerging. The tree remained, but it was always changing. It was the best metaphor he could manage for what he'd learned. You didn't stop being who you were. The violence, the skills, the past, those were permanent as scars. But you chose what to build around them. Chose whether they defined you or just informed you. Steelhand Vance had been a killer. Gideon Vance was a blacksmith who could kill if necessary. The difference seemed small, but it meant everything. When Elena returned the following week, she found him installing the gate at the new town hall. She stood watching for a while before he noticed her. It's beautiful, she said. It's functional. It's both. She stepped closer, examining the details. The tree. That's you, isn't it? That obvious? To someone who knows what to look for. She traced one of the falling leaves with her finger. Roots in the past, branches reaching toward something new. I like it. Thought you might. They stood in comfortable silence, and Gideon felt something settle inside him. Not peace, exactly, but acceptance. Understanding that he'd always carry both versions of himself, and that was okay as long as he chose carefully which one to be each day. I'm staying, Elena said, in case you wondered. I hoped. And I want to talk about what happened, about what comes next, about whether a school teacher and a reformed gunfighter can build something worth having. Reform might be generous. Reforming, then, she smiled. We'll figure it out as we go. No promises about easy. I don't want easy. I want real. Gideon set down his tools and offered his hand. Elena took it, and they walked together back toward the forge as the sun climbed higher. Behind them, the gate stood solid and complete, a symbol of what they'd defended and what they might yet build. Raven Hollow had survived its trial. The cost had been high, measured in lives and innocence lost. But something remained, something worth protecting, worth fighting for when necessary, worth building in the quiet times between storms. Gideon understood now that he'd never fully escaped Steelhand Vance. The name, the reputation, the skills, those were permanent fixtures. But he could choose what to build around them, could forge a life from the raw materials of his past without being defined by them. Noah appeared later that afternoon, eager to learn more about metalwork. Thomas came with him, nodded at Gideon without hostility. Small reconciliations, but they counted. Morrison stopped by around evening with news that the territorial governor had officially cleared Gideon of wrongdoing. The case was closed. Justice served, or at least the frontier version of it. And as night fell over Raven Hollow, Gideon fired up his forge one more time. Not for weapons or defense, just for a simple horseshoe order from a farmer on the edge of town. Basic work, honest work, the kind that built communities instead of destroying them. The hammer rang against hot iron, and in that rhythm, Gideon found something he'd been searching for 19 years. Not redemption, that remained out of reach, always would be. Not forgiveness, some sins were too large for that. But purpose. The understanding that strength wasn't about how many men you could kill or how fast you could draw. It was about what you chose to build with the time you had, what you protected, what you taught the next generation. Noah worked beside him, learning the trade, and Gideon saw in the kid's concentration something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. The belief that tomorrow could be different than yesterday. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Outside, stars emerged against the darkening sky. The town settled into evening quiet, families gathering for dinner, children being tucked into bed, normal life reasserting itself against the memory of violence. And in a forge at the edge of town, a man who'd been too many things worked to become something simpler, something better. Not a legend, not a killer, not even a hero, just a blacksmith who'd learned that the strongest iron wasn't the kind that killed. It was the kind that built homes, protected communities, and proved that even damaged men could forge something worth leaving behind. The hammer rang steady and true, shaping metal into something useful. And for the first time in 19 years, Gideon Vance felt like he might actually belong somewhere. Not because he'd hidden who he was, but because he'd finally learned what to do with it.